10 years ago, gates were opened all over the world, from which monsters began to appear, and people became awakened. They became hunters of those monsters from the gates. A huge crystal flew into the face of a boy named Kang Jihyun. Falling to the floor, he was in agony. In fact, he is an awakened C rank, but still endures bullying from his classmates. The ability that he got is called an exoskeleton. He can cover his entire body with it, but the problem is that this is accompanied by just hellish pain. But even worse is the fact that the exoskeleton disappears over time, leaving disgusting scars on Jihyun's body. Fucking bastards attack the boy every day and laugh to their heart's content. And the police or the teacher can do nothing or object to the awakened C rank who receives special treatment from the government. Jihyun continues to endure bullying for the sake of his mother, who works several jobs to provide for her son. Jihyun's father died when he was 5 years old, so he is obliged to finish school and become a full-fledged hunter in order to financially support his mother. Although his income will be small, they will at least be able to move to a larger apartment. After some time, Jihyun looks at his mother in horror. The woman, with an empty look, bandaged, lay connected to a life support machine. She was no longer human. It was a simple shell that was devoid of consciousness. The agent who stood behind the boy said that it was an accident. Those same 3 bastards from Jihyun's school entered the cafe where his mother worked. The main asshole immediately began to show off his abilities in front of the girl. Saying that she had a lot of work, she walked away, but accidentally touched the phone, fell from the table, and broke. She quickly picked it up, and the next second, many diamond needles pierced the girl. According to the agent, the abilities of the young C-rank hunter got out of control. Having found out who exactly did this, Jihyun realized that it was not an accident. From despair and bitterness, he fell into madness and began to tear his skin, cursing these assholes. After some time, 2 teenagers are sitting near the gate waiting for their friend to return. They were discussing the incident with the girl in the cafe. One was clearly worried that the girl could die, but the white-haired one reassured his sucker that they were awakened, and this was not the first time he had beaten someone to the point of being a vegetable. At this point, the guy we already knew appeared in the clearing near the gate. He walked towards them, repeating the same phrase, "Why did you do this?" The pain and resentment that was inside burst out with the words, "Why did you do this to my mother?" Having recognized his punching toy, the white-haired bastard smiled. He said that he did not know that the hot girl was his mother, because she looked very young. The next moment, a diamond spear pierced the boy's body. The white-haired one said that he almost managed to pick up this beauty. The words he heard gave Jihyun strength. He took the spear with his hand and pulled it out of his chest. An exoskeleton was already visible at the site of the wound, causing incredible pain to the owner of the ability. The clearly impressed leader of the hooligans created another 24 diamond mines in the air, after which he plunged them into Jihyun's body. "Who do you think you are? You're just dirt and a loser," said the white-haired man. These words fueled Jihyun's rage. All cut up and pierced by spears, suffering from unbearable pain, he slowly approached the offender. Asshole turned to his friend, offering him to show his lightning. He did not have to persuade him for long. A huge pillar of electricity hit the already wounded guy. The clothes were burned from such a discharge of electricity, exposing the wounded body of the boy. Motherfuckers looked down on Jihyun. When they decided that he was finished, they began to leave. Wounded and beaten, Jihyun was not going to give up, so he grabbed the blonde by the leg, asking where they were going. Snow White got very angry. He hit the annoying fly on the head with his diamond fist with all his might. He dealt blow after blow, calling Jihyun shit. Inserting his fist into his classmate's mouth, he began to slowly press it in, breaking his jaw and teeth. I'm sure Snow White is a real sadist. While he was enjoying mocking Jihyun, the gate turned red. The idiot friends noticed that they needed to inform the government that a bloody gate had appeared. But the white-haired freak had something in mind. He told his girlfriends that he was going to send this piece of shit there. After which, he activated his ability. A huge diamond lump appeared from the ground, piercing Jihyun's body, sending him into the bloody gate. Anger, rage, and despair were on Jihyun's face as he flew. He screamed that he would kill everyone, he would destroy them, grind them into dust. This only amused the white-haired asshole. "Try if you can," he said before the gate completely closed. After flying a few meters, the guy's body hit the ground, breaking at least several bones. The blood gate is a phenomenon in which the gate turns red and crimson. Monsters do not come out of these gates, so nothing more is known about them. The reason is that no one who entered there got out alive. Many different monsters surrounded the body of the broken Jihun. Blows, cuts, ragged bites. They devoured him like a pack of hungry hyenas, continuing to do this even after only a skeleton remained of him. Recently, a new study was made due to the unknown mana in the blood gate. People who got there began their transformation. You ask into whom? They turned into monsters, into the fiend of the blood gate. Jihyun's metamorphosis has already begun. Thanks to his ability, he quickly began to regenerate. He changed completely, even his consciousness. But still, two things could not allow him to lose his mind. These are memories of the abuse of those freaks who beat his mother to a vegetable state. Vile faces did not allow Jihyun to forget who he was, even for a second. His agony lasted like an eternity, suffering from hellish pain and devouring memories. His anger knew no bounds, and seeing the face of that bastard before his eyes, he slammed his turned hand into the ground with all his might. Even the monsters were shocked by this. They turned to him again to devour the unfinished dinner. But the turned Jihyun clearly had other plans for this. A crowd of ugly monsters rushed towards him, but were immediately cut into pieces. Now they were locked in the gate with him, not him. Rage and revenge kept him conscious. 5 years later, we are shown a live broadcast where the host asks questions to the already familiar pieces of shit, who during this time have managed to become high-class hunters. The host did not miss the opportunity to shit on Snow White with a tricky question, asking about the incident that happened 5 years ago. The white-haired guy obviously went to theater classes because he immediately squeezed out a few tears. Admitting that it happened by accident with the mother of his close friend, he apologized to him, but he disappeared somewhere. At that very moment, the broken door was already flying at the head of the white-haired bastard. Using his ability, he kicked the door away, clearly annoyed that the interview was interrupted. People saw the monster and immediately began to run in different directions. Each of his steps made cracks in the floor. Seeing 3 guys, the monster made a lightning jump, reducing the distance so quickly that his fist crashed into Snow White's face with great force, causing him to fly several meters away. Minute, hour, day, all the monster did was cut the monsters in its path, seeing the exit ahead. The body flew between 2 Snow White suckers, clearly surprising those. In front of them stood a real Terminator, whose body was covered with a bone exoskeleton like armor like Tony Stark's. A memory flashed through the head of this monster, after which he said, "I got out, bastards." The white-haired hunter had already gotten to his feet, ordering his friend to kill the monster. Thousands of lightning struck Jihun's body, but he stood motionless as if he didn't feel anything. As soon as the ability stopped, he made a quick lunge and chopped off the annoying hunter's head, a bone growth on his hand. Shocked, they watched as their friend's severed head fell to the floor. The monster stood there without a single scratch. Then the guy who was always chewing gum decided to crush the monster with his ability by creating a stone egg. But this didn't work either. The next second, the monster was already holding the guy by the lower jaw, after which he tore it off. Falling, he grabbed the scraps of the lower part of his face, but the monster did not lose his breath and delivered the finishing blow. Taking advantage of the moment, the white-haired one struck the monster in the back of the head. But unexpectedly, the diamond armor with which he covered his hand began to crack. Then he created thousands of diamond copies and sent them at the monster. The white-haired hunter looked at the motionless monster, clearly pleased with himself. But suddenly, he began to slowly rise. The hunter clearly did not expect that someone would be able to survive this attack. In front of him stood a true embodiment of a demon. Enveloped in diamond armor, the white-haired one was going to finish what he started, inflicting many strong blows. Each blow was like a blow from a huge sledgehammer. But suddenly, the monster was able to block the last blow, grabbing his opponent's fist with his teeth. He clenched his fist with terrifying force, which caused many cracks to appear on the armor. The hunter's face was covered with a grimace of pain. Continuing to squeeze his hand with his teeth, the monster pierced the white-haired man's body with his bone growth. Horrible pain pierced the S-rank hunter, but he still found the strength to activate another of his abilities. A huge diamond needle made a hole in the monster's body, lifting him high above the ground, after which he tried to escape. Not having time to run to the exit, the diamond spear that he had previously created pierced his chest. The monster that had thrown the spear was already approaching him, and the recently damaged body had already been completely restored. Along the way, he collected several more diamond spears. No longer so menacing and arrogant, the hunter begged the monster to leave. He tried to crawl to the exit, but many needles pierced his body. The badly wounded but still alive hunter asked why they were doing this to him and who he was, after which the monster tore off part of his exoskeleton, exposing his face to the enemy. Seeing the face, the white-haired bastard remembered how he mocked the poor boy who could not give him back. Now, he realized that he was doomed to die. Blow after blow, the one who had previously been just a punching bag drove the white-haired man's head into the floor, causing fatal damage. After which, he drove the bone blade with all his might into the mouth of the S-rank hunter, piercing his head. Having finished the execution, the monster, who was once a guy named Jihun, was able to carry out his revenge. The memory of his mother, whom he visited before he came here, surfaced in his head. A group of hunters were killing monsters in a normal gait. 4 hunters were praising their healer. She thanked them because it was her first time getting so far. But in an instant, their facial expressions changed. They offered to pay her with their bodies if she was so grateful to them. The head of one of the hunters rolled on the ground, showing us a familiar monster. The remaining 3 decided to attack together to quickly deal with him. But their magic does not work at all, breaking against the monster's durable exoskeleton. A man in a straw hat decides to go into close combat, but his katana simply breaks against the shell that the monster is covered with. This was a fatal mistake, because the next moment another head fell to the floor. While the shocked hunters were trying to understand where such a strong monster came from, their heads also flew off their shoulders. The girl, trembling with fear, watched the monster approaching her. Seeing that there was a human face under the mask, she decided to thank her savior, but then she fell silent. Forever. Sitting on his knees, Jihun simply looked through the hole in the ceiling, drops falling on his body, which looked more like a bone shell. Suddenly, someone called him by name. It was a girl named Lumin, the head of the Korean Hunters Association. Surprised that she knew him, he decided to destroy her. Preparing to deliver a fatal blow, Jihyun heard, "Your mother can be brought back to life." The fist stopped in front of Lumin's face, who did not even move. Jihyun asked what she was talking about. It turns out that she is not only the head of the Korean Association, but also the only S-rank healer in the world, and only she can completely cure her. He can't just believe her words, which he told her. But Lumin asked if he thinks that his mother lasted these 5 years while he was gone, only because of the hospital. Jihyun asked the girl what exactly she wanted from him. The problem is that the hunters are too strong, and the weapons of humanity have lost their meaning compared to the hunters. After all, there are those who are stronger than even nuclear weapons. Of course, thanks to them, most of the monsters in the gates are destroyed. But the gates do not disappear. But on the contrary, they only grow, and some of them connect with each other, forming a passage that ignores the borders of countries. The balance of forces is broken, and it is a matter of time before other countries want to capture Korea using hunters. That is why Japan gradually began to send its hunters here. Korea could not answer them with the help of hunters because it would attract the attention of larger countries, but that was before you appeared. Become a monster for us, and I will return your mother to you. Headquarters of the Japanese Hunters Association. The Japanese defense minister asks his subordinate why they can't contact the hunters who went to Korea. Japan's #1 S-rank, Ikosai Kageru, assured the minister that he would personally find out what was going on. After the meeting, the secretary asked Kageru if he really was going alone, since all the hunters they sent were elite. Turning to her, he coldly said that he didn't need an escort. After passing through the gate, Kageru kept muttering to himself that everyone who disappeared here were useless pieces of shit. They couldn't have died from monsters like that. But suddenly he saw a mountain of corpses with an unknown monster that looked like a human sitting on it. What he saw made the Japanese hunter very angry, so he immediately attacked it. Kageru was surprised that the monster blocked his attack, but it didn't matter since he was #1 in Japan. Taking a stance, he began a series of attacks. First moon, powerful energy blades hit the monster. Second moon cross attack slammed Jihun's body into the wall. The exoskeleton withstood the previous 2 strikes, so the hunter activated the third moon, intending to cut off the monster's head, but it lunged and counterattacked. Reacting with lightning speed, Kageru cut off Jihun's hand, after which he immediately struck again with his sword, cutting off the monster's head. Kageru can't understand how they could lose to something like that. At this time, memories began to flash in the severed head. The man waved to the woman and child who were standing on the other side of the road. The child happily ran to his father, right under the wheels of a truck that was moving at high speed. The father reacted quickly and pushed his son out from under the wheels of the truck, but he himself was unable to avoid the collision. From that moment on, their life went downhill. The mother had to work hard to somehow feed the family, and every night she cried into her pillow. The boy understood that he was to blame for the fact that his father died, to blame for the fact that his mother cried every night. Therefore, he had no right to life, but fate decided otherwise. When the mother entered the room, she saw her son with a cut on his arm, but it immediately healed. He is awakened, so he will become a hunter and make her happy. Consciousness returned to Jihun. He remembered his deal. He will do everything necessary so that his mother can be healthy again. So he will destroy the first hunter of Japan. Kageru, clearly unaware of what was happening behind him, carelessly sheathed his katana as Jihun's head crawled towards his leg and bit down hard as if it was a bear trap. Shocked, Kageru couldn't understand how the monster could regenerate if he had cut off its head while leg had almost been bitten in half. By slashing at the monster with his katana, he was able to free his leg and activated his strongest ability. 12th Moon. He moved so fast that he left after images in the air, cutting every inch of the monster into pieces. The impact was so strong that parts of Jihyun's body were thrown out of the gate. Confident that this had definitely finished off the monster, Kageru decided to go back to report what had happened. Suddenly, a huge sharp bone was embedded in the hunter's other leg. Seeing the monster regenerate again, he lost his composure and dealt another blow. 3 days later, the Japanese defense minister and the country's elite hunters stood at the gate. They were all gathered there because Ikusai Kageru had disappeared 3 days ago and had not been in contact since. Therefore, they had to figure out what happened. Just as they were about to enter the portal, a severed head flew out of the gate. And then the one who threw it appeared. The minister began to scream in horror, but the monster immediately slashed his neck with his bone sword. But then he received a crushing blow that created a real crater in the ground. At this time, Luming wondered if Jihun would be able to destroy him. Japan's number 0 and rank hunter. 3 years ago, all the gates were cleared. It seemed the world could finally breathe a sigh of relief, but fear only grew stronger. People stopped fearing monsters and began fearing hunters. Nations tried to stand against them, but they failed. That's when hunters divided the world. Some forged agreements with governments, while others seized control entirely. Japan was one of the first countries to fall under the hunter's rule. The reason? The Prime Minister, a rank SSS hunter, notorious for his aggression. He dreamed of conquering South Korea, but his ambitions were shattered by something far more terrifying, a monster. The hunters stared in shock at the creature regenerating at an incredible speed. 2 of them quickly rushed to finish it off, aiming to decapitate the beast. But the monster cut off one of the hunter's heads with a bone blade, while the other was grabbed by the face and had his skull crushed like an overripe mango. The Japanese hunters stood frozen, paralyzed by shock. The monster stood still, exuding a defiant air. The crowd seethed with anger and irritation, but the Prime Minister declared he'd kill anyone who dared interfere in their fight. For a moment, a memory flashed before the Prime Minister's eyes. The city was falling asleep under the snow, and a boy sat shivering on the ground. Suddenly, a man approached him and asked why he was sitting there in the snowfall. It turned out to be the young Prime Minister. Looking at the boy, the man remained silent, draped his jacket over him, and took him off the streets. The boy was an orphan. The minister asked for his name. Kagero, sir. Anger and rage overtook the Prime Minister's emotions. In the next instant, the monster was hit with a powerful blow. Not giving the creature a chance to recover, the minister closed the distance, delivering devastating strikes. To ensure the monster couldn't regenerate anymore, he activated his ability, Magma Breath, scorching everything in front of him. The ground itself began to melt from the intense heat. Amid the glow of the molten earth lay fragments of a skeleton. The Prime Minister approached Kagero's head, but suddenly, the skeleton began regenerating with astonishing speed. Veins of fury appeared on the minister's face. Another memory flashed through his mind. A battlefield littered with the corpses of hunters surrounded him. He spoke to Kagero. "We barely had the strength to conquer Japan. Next, I plan to take South Korea and China. So if you want, I'll allow you to step back." But Kagero rejected the offer. "I used to be nothing, and you took me in. For the rest of my life, I will be grateful to you. However, there's one thing I want. When all this is over, may I call you father?" The answer Kagero heard surprised him. The Prime Minister replied that he already was his son. And so, he transformed his entire body into a living volcano, magma that burned and melted everything in its path. The monster, now fully regenerated, took a step forward. At that moment, it was unclear who the real monster was. Streams of molten magma surged toward the creature, incinerating it down to its skeleton. But even that couldn't stop Jihyun, who leapt from the flow of lava straight at the Prime Minister. Noticing this, the Prime Minister caused a massive volcanic eruption to burst from the ground. The skeleton burned and regenerated simultaneously, writhing in unimaginable pain. Even the hunters watching from a distance were stunned by the enormous volcano that had erupted near them. The Prime Minister stood atop the scene, watching as the monster burned alive in the crater, endlessly regenerating. Calling over his deputy, Haname, he ordered her to freeze the upper layer of the lava, hardening it into solid rock. This trapped the monster in an eternal prison, doomed to burn and regenerate for eternity. Meanwhile, in South Korea, the Diamond Guild, we are shown a room filled with medical equipment. A woman was healing the body of a hunter we are already familiar with. Slowly, feeling returned to his limbs, compelling him to open his eyes. Atop the volcano, the Prime Minister of Japan continued giving orders. Everyone was to return to their posts, with a small group remaining, here to maintain control over the situation. A hand protruding from the hardened lava began to move. The monster that was Jihyun had endured such magma tens of thousands of times in the bloody gates. It was impossible to get used to it, but this time he wouldn't need to. With these thoughts, he smashed parts of his skeleton against the solidified lava until he broke his way out. The pain Jihyun felt was unbearable. Ordering everyone to take cover, Junji Ito, the Prime Minister of Japan, leapt into the crater. His beloved Haname watched with unease. "You're pushing yourself too hard, Juto. Even magma regeneration has its limits," she said softly, but he ignored her. His thoughts were consumed by one goal: making Japan strong. Right now, the country was weak compared to Russia, China, and the United States. If Korea wasn't absorbed, Japan was doomed. Haname clung to him with a trembling voice. "So many hunters will die?" "Most of the fighting," Juto declared, "will be done by me. Even if my body breaks, I will protect my country." Delivering powerful blows, Yuto pushed himself to new limits. A crushing force radiated from every strike, turning his fists into bloodied pulp. Combining his attacks, he forced his opponent into constant defense, leaving no room for a counterattack. With a leap, pouring every ounce of strength into the move, Yuto shattered the monster's skull into fragments. At that moment, Haname ordered everyone to retreat. But the hunters fell to their knees in apology. "We cannot abandon our leader," they said. "We owe him too much." Meanwhile, Juto was attempting to drown the monster in the depths of the volcano. As it disintegrated and burned in the magma, the monster's body began to rise to the surface piece by piece. It quickly regenerated on the surface, and before Juto could act, it lunged at Haname. Grabbing her arm, it leapt back into the crater. Juto prepared to unleash his magma breath, but seeing his wife and the hunters who rushed to save her, he was forced to hold back. He severed the monster's arm, freeing Haname. But that was exactly what the monster wanted. In the next instant, it decapitated the leader of Japan with a bone blade. Seizing on Haname's shock, the monster grabbed her hand and pressed it against Juto's severed head just before his body was shattered. The hunters of the Japanese Association rushed to Haname, asking if she was all right, but she could only look at her beloved with tears streaming down her face. She had just killed him with her own hands. Even the hunters were stunned, but the next moment they heard footsteps. The monster, fully regenerated, was walking toward them. Seeing it, Haname fainted. "Are you awake?" "Juto, I had a nightmare." Her beloved calmed her, assuring her everything was fine. They kissed, but in the next moment, Haname returned to reality. She saw countless corpses of Japanese hunters and the monstrous skeletal figure walking away. Horrified, she froze herself in ice. Japan had been completely defeated by a single monster, which vanished into the gates. South Korea, Diamond Guild. Taisu, the white-haired hunter, stood before a massive cluster of mana stones. A young woman warned him not to overexert himself, reminding him that they had only managed to heal him because a trace of mana remained in his body. Remembering the face of his killer, the filth he had once treated as beneath him, Taisu swore to destroy him at any cost. The woman, clearly troubled, asked hesitantly, "Are you really going to?" "Yes," said Han Taisu, an S-rank hunter. "Break the seal." His back was covered in strange runes. But the woman, damp with sweat, finally said, "It's done. The seal is broken." Satisfied, Taisu ordered all members of the guild to assemble. Before long, every hunter in the Diamond Guild stood before him. They bowed to their leader, informing him that after killing, the monster had disappeared into the gates. Loyal subordinates assured him that they would find the creature and kill it. But before they could finish, the vice leader lost his head in a single swift motion. Taesu caught the falling head and began absorbing the power of his former subordinate. Fully consuming it, he stood stronger. It was thanks to this man that the Diamond Guild had become the best in Korea. His unique ability was telekinesis. Demonstrating his newfound strength, Taesu used his ability to crush another subordinate's body. The woman turned her head away, closing her eyes to the horrifying sight. Han Taesu's ability was cursed, though he would never admit it. Turning to the remaining hunters, he commanded them to give him their powers. Then, he began to slaughter everyone in his path. 1,528 members of the Diamond Guild were annihilated and consumed by the madman known as Han Taesu, all for one goal: to kill the monster that had killed him. No, to kill Jihun. But it wasn't enough. He needed more power. And so, he set his sights on Russia. The head of the Korean Association was already waiting for Jihyun when he emerged from the gates. She greeted him warmly. At the association's headquarters, she showed him his mother, who was connected to magical stones. Her S-rank ability allowed her to regenerate every single cell, one by one, using mana. It would take a long time, but saving her was possible. If the head of the association continued to perform the process daily, Jihyun's mother could awaken by the following week. Exhausted, she collapsed. Jihyun asked why she was pushing herself so hard when it consumed so much mana. Taking his hand, she smiled and said, "I just want you to live." Suddenly, a glow began emanating from their hands. Jihyun instinctively pulled away. Looking at him intently, Lumen said, "Your transformation into a monster is progressing. The blood gates first appeared 15 years ago, and since then, all other gates have slowly started turning into blood gates. You're the only one who managed to escape." But after that, the changes began accelerating. As a result, gates around the world are transforming into blood gates, and the mana flowing from them is fueling your power. If we compare gates in terms of mana, normal ones are merely holes, but blood gates, they're passages to another dimension. They're all connected to something, and that something is searching for you. Monsters began pouring out of the blood gates directly into the streets of Seoul. Chaos erupted as panic-stricken people fled for their lives while the monsters slaughtered anyone in their path. Presidential residence. The president of South Korea shouted at his subordinate, demanding to know why the Diamond Guild wasn't responding. "Sir, the entire guild has been wiped out." He suggested seeking help from abroad, but the president wasn't ready to take that step, believing it would spell disaster for Korea. Instead, he ordered martial law to be declared and called for all available hunters to be summoned. The heads of many of Korea's top guilds, Daos Guild, Vinyl Guild, and Yanhak Guild, took up the fight, but they too were wiped out in an instant. Shocked, Jihyun turned to Lumen and asked, "Is all of this really because of me?" She looked at him and asked in return, "What will you do?" knowing the answer. As he sliced through a monster, Jihyun thought furiously about everything that had happened to him. When he died in the blood gates, their mana had absorbed into him, attempting to transform him into a monster. He had barely endured it. As a result, he gained the power of supernatural regeneration, or so he thought at the time. Now it was clear. The mana of the blood gates wouldn't let him die until he fully turned into a monster. And this at the very moment when he could have tried to live a peaceful life with his mother after her healing. Grabbing the head of another monster, Jihun crushed it in his hand, screaming in rage,
"Why can't you just leave me alone?"
At that very moment, someone was watching Jihun directly from the blood gates. A creature resembling a skeleton sat upon a throne. So, he's the reason for the rupture? Good news was that there was a limit to how many could emerge from one portal. Eventually, Jihun had slain all the monsters in the vicinity. Suddenly, a bullet pierced through his head. Blood oozed from the gaping wound. One of the soldiers in the Korean army asked his commander whether they should open fire on him since he had only been killing monsters. But the order from the government was clear: apprehend the monster until the hunters arrived. An artillery barrage erupted, tearing Jihyun's body apart. He screamed, pleading for them to stop, but it was all in vain. After some time, the area was littered with the corpses of soldiers. The reason Jihyun lost consciousness was that the mana seeping into his body from the blood gates was trying to transform him into a monster. Yet, what he saw brought him back to his senses. His school friend's head dangled from a bone blade. a haunting memory flashing through Jihyun's mind. While his classmates tormented him, there was a light-haired boy in his class, his only true friend who genuinely wanted to help. This friend possessed the unique ability of his right eye, which could record everything he saw, collecting evidence against their tormentors. However, one day he ended up in the hospital. Someone had ripped out his eye. Jihyun felt an overwhelming guilt towards his friend, knowing this was the doing of that bastard Tae-soo. He longed for vengeance. But his friend had told him not to even think about it. Life is already miserable, so there's nothing special about it. A scream of pain and regret escaped Jihyun's chest. The monsters that began to appear again rushed at him. After cutting them in half, Jihyun rushed in rage to destroy everyone who appeared from the new gates. At that time, the president's office was discussing that this monster was responsible for the appearance of the bloody gates. The situation began to get out of control, and the bloody gates were now appearing in other countries. It was necessary to contact the International Bureau of Hunters because this could not be postponed any longer. Korea had lost all its hunters. All the world's strongest hunters received a request to destroy the monster responsible for the cataclysm. China, Russia, USA. 5 years spent in the gates felt like a hell. Jihyun fought without a chance to eat, drink, or sleep. His body could not succumb to death, as the mana within kept forcing it to regenerate, yet it threatened to hasten his transformation into a monster. Only two faces anchored him to sanity: the lifeless visage of his mother and the face of the bastard who had caused this torment. But now, he wondered if his resolve had weakened simply because he had exacted his revenge. Jihyun feared that the mana leaking from the gates would steal his consciousness forever, because he had already killed innocent people. Thus, he fought monsters far from the gates, believing that perhaps slaying them could atone for his sins. In the next instant, his body was shredded into fragments. A severed eye gazed upon the man descending from the heavens. The gates had emerged on Christmas, springing up from nowhere in various places. The pastor who was preaching at that moment awakened the power. He was sure that it was the will of God. In the largest church in America, which had 100,000 believers, 138 people were slightly injured, and not one person died. He became the world's first awakened SSS rank. As a child, Jihyun had idolized this hero, Stephen Lucas, the SSS rank hunter, #1 in America. What the hell was he doing in Korea? Lucas touched Jihyun's body, and it fell apart again. Yet the mana oozing from the bloody gates fueled him, allowing for rapid regeneration. Lucas wanted to push Jihyun into the gate with his ability, but he managed to slow down a little with his foot and fell before reaching the gate. All awakened people with the help of mana can communicate with others without a translator, so he turned to Lucas, saying that he was not a monster. It worked. The American hunter stopped his attack. Jihyun begged to listen to him, and after his story, Lucas hugged him and said, "It must have been very hard for you." Lucas asked his name and continued talking. His goal is to save as many people as possible. That is why he fights. And today, he had to kill many people for this goal. And to atone for his guilt, Lucas engraved the names of each of them on his body. He can help Jihyun destroy all the monsters. But during this time, a disaster will spread across the globe, and many people will die. "So sorry," Lucas said, engraving Jihyun's name on his body, after which he activated his ability. "I will kill you to save others," Lucas said. At this time, Lee Ha-yeon was healing Jihyun's mother while watching what was happening through the screen. Blood was streaming from her nose, eyes, and corners of her mouth. Meanwhile, Ruzana Vladimirova, a cis-ranked top 1 in Russia, was also watching everything through the screens. The reason she can't do anything is the Arctic monster. All the hunters in Russia are trying to contain the monster. Suddenly, the door opened and Tae-soo walked in. He offered the Queen of Russia to catch the Arctic monster. The Arctic monster, it was the first SSS rank monster. When it appeared, the Russian base at the North Pole was destroyed. The Russian government, who knew nothing about the gate and the monster, mobilized all their forces, but they were unable to suppress it. In the end, half of the nuclear bombs in the country were used. However, the monster did not die from the blow that did not contain mana. And because of the radioactive contamination, the north of Russia turned into a country of monsters. As a result, in order to restore their resources, they declared war on America. "I will catch this monster," Tae-soo said, but the queen only laughed. "A S-rank hunter will never defeat a monster." With these words, she activated her ability. But Tae-soo continued. He said that he had the strength to do so. Suddenly, the queen noticed a strange aura around Tae-soo. "What are you?" she asked. In any case, if Tae-soo succeeds, she promised him half of the mana stones from the monster, after which the white-haired hunter left. Lucas knelt down to say a prayer while Jihyun's body was falling apart. From a small particle that was carried away by the wind, he began to regenerate again. Jihun didn't know what to do because he had no chance against Lucas one-on-one. Finding himself behind the guy, Lucas was about to strike, but Jihun got ahead of him by piercing his head with a bone blade. But it didn't work. Lucas hugged Jihun, saying that he could hurt him as much as he wanted if it would make him feel better. And even if he regenerated, Lucas promised that he would kill him without suffering, as long as it took. Jihun wanted to scream, but he couldn't. Every second was painful for him. Jihun survived only thanks to revenge. However, Lucas's instant fatal attack forced him to start regeneration from scratch, which easily surpassed the pain that was before. And the pain went beyond what was acceptable. Why should he feel so much pain? Why should he suffer? What did he do wrong? This needs to stop. Lucas is right. If he lives, then many innocent people will really die. And even if he dies, Mom will still live, and that's enough. Fuck you. Having absorbed a huge amount of mana from the blood gate, Jihyun, who had lost his mind, put the mana into his punch, piercing Lucas's body. The drone that was filming their fight broadcasted the image to the entire world. The mana strike was so powerful that the building where Lihyun was treating Jihyun's mother was cut in half. She fell to the floor, exhausted, bleeding. The treatment was over. Jihun's body changed slightly, indicating that his transformation into a monster was progressing. Even Lucas was surprised by the ominous mana emanating from him. But that didn't change anything, activating his killer attack. He hugged Jihun, but he wasn't going to give up and stabbed Lucas with his blade, who was already behind him. He thrust his hand into his head, but Jihun cut off it. Hand continued to squeeze Jihun's brain, causing him severe pain. In order to free himself from the ability of the American hunter, Jihun tore his head apart. Lucas's power allowed him to hear the sounds of those who suffer, those who are in despair, but he also hears the sounds of those saved and those who believe in him, which gives him even more power. With these words, he activated another of his abilities, trapping Jihun. Continuing to cry, Lucas began to squeeze the body of the monster, crushing it like a tomato. But the regeneration did not stop, and Jihun fully recovered, trying to deliver a powerful blow to Lucas's head. Lucas was shocked. Is this really what God wants from him? Jihun, who had already rushed to attack, was stopped by one touch. Jihun's hands dug into his chest, tearing himself apart. He repeated a verse from the Bible. Lucas took over Jihun's body with his ability. Repeating lines from the Bible, he continued to tear himself apart. Jihun could not understand what was happening to his body. It was so painful. Jihyun's body, crucified by his own hands, hung in the air and the next moment simply disappeared, leaving a bloody stain. Mana went to the place where the body shreds were. Jihun regenerated again. Without waiting for the body to fully recover, Lucas called him and threw him down, simultaneously breaking an entire building with his body. Flying through the building, Jihun found himself in the sewers, covered in concrete debris. His mother stood in front of him.